To see each of you here this morning, and it is Father's Day according to the calendar, and we do want to spend just a few moments celebrating what that means. And just an introduction. We've had a great week. We had the opportunity to spend some time with both of our children, and all but one of our grandchildren. Our oldest grandson, I was telling Jeff a while ago, had just finished his first year of college, and he's working, and so he wasn't able to join us. We were together Friday and then yesterday morning, and the kids were swimming and canoeing and kayaking and tube floating and all that good stuff. So we had a great weekend, and there's just nothing better. What a better way to spend a Father's Day weekend than with your children, with your offspring. And having said that, I was thinking about the relationship that parents or fathers have with their children, and the thought struck my mind that to have a good relationship with your children is something that has to be intentional. You have to make it happen. It does not just happen on its own. You have to make it happen. You have to sacrifice the time to develop an intentional relationship with your children. And I believe that also extends to your grandchildren and to other family members, and also to our circle of friends. To have a relationship, to have a friendship with one another is something that is intentional, or should be intentional. Having said that, one of my favorite characters in the Old Testament is an individual that we really don't know a lot about. But what we do know about him is almost beyond description. In fact, if you would look with me at Hebrews, the 11th chapter, and reading verses 5 and 6 of the book of Hebrews, the 11, here's what it says. It says, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards earnestly those who seek him." We're going to give some thoughts here in just a few moments to the man Enoch, and he was a part of the original generation of mankind. In fact, he was a part of that original generation from Adam to Noah. He falls in that category. But having said that, I mentioned that having a relationship with our children is something as intentional. I hate to admit this, but in 1974, 50 years ago, there was a very popular song that was penned. Some of you will remember it, some of you won't. But there was a very popular song that was penned. It was recorded by a man by the name of Harry Chapin. And his wife's name was Susan. And Harry and Susan wrote this song, and it became a smash hit. The name of it, "The Cat's in the Cradle." Does that ring a bell with any of you? I wouldn't even attempt to sing it. I used to think I could sing a little bit, but I lost what little ability I had of that a long time ago, and so I wouldn't even try. But I remember when I would have been 22 years old 21 or 22 when this song came out, and I remember listening to it and thinking, well, that's a sad song. That's a sad song, and it really is. But listen to the words. "My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way. But there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. And he was talking 'fore I knew it, and as he grew, he'd say, 'Dad, I'm going to be just like you.' you know I'm going to be just like you. And then it goes in the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then. Well, my son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today. I've got a lot to do. And he said, that's okay. And he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. He said, I'm going to be like him. Yeah, I know I'm going to be just like him. Well, he came home from college just the other day. So much like a man, I just had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while? And he shook his head. And they said with a smile, what I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the keys. See you later. Can I have them, please? And then it goes to the chorus again, and the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, son? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad, and you'll know we'll have a good time then. And then the last verse is, I've long since retired. My son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you if you don't mind. And he said, I'd love to, Dad, if I can find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been sure nice talking to you. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cat's in the cradle, and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, son? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. We're going to have a good time then. That is a sad song, isn't it? It's a very sad song. It's a song about relationships that were severed in a non-intentional way. When the inverse of that is that relationships can be built, memories can be established if we are intentional. And that's a great message for dads. That's a great message for grandfathers. That's a great message for uncles. That's a great message for any man. If you want to have a relationship with your children, if you want to have a relationship with your grandchildren, then be intentional about it. Don't be afraid to sacrifice some things in your life that may seem to be important short term, but in long term mean nothing. Mean nothing. What's more important than a relationship with a child? What is more important than a friendship with a son or a daughter or a grandchild? Let's be intentional about it. Well, in the Bible, there are a lot of people who were intentional with their faith and the things that they learned to be important. And one of them is a man that I believe to be one of the great heroes of the faith, although not much is written about him, but his name is Enoch. And the writer of Hebrews tells us that by faith Enoch was taken away from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. Now, if you go back to Genesis chapter 5, and I'm not going to read it this morning, but if you read the first part of that chapter, in fact, if you would read the entire chapter, verses 1 through 32, you would see the accounting of the genealogy from Adam to Noah. And you come down there about verse 18, the Bible, listen to what it says. And when Jared had lived 162 years of age, he became the father of Enoch. And after he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years. He had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. Now, if you read the account of his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, all those who were in his past leading up to him, there's a particular cadence that's set. And that cadence says, so-and-so was born, lived so many years, had this son, and then had other sons and daughters, and he died. That's the commonality between all of them. And he died, and he died, and he died, and he died. And then you come down to Enoch, and the Bible says Enoch lived 65 years. He became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, he walked with God 300 years, had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. And then the cadence is broken when the Bible says that Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. I think that there's a lot that we can learn about Enoch. And possibly his father Jared before him. Enoch's life was what I believe to be a very intentional life. There are three things that I believe that are very important for us to point out this morning, and I may be reading between the lines just a little bit, but I don't think so. There are three things that I believe made Enoch a very exceptional person in the lineup of these first generations. The first thing that I learned about Enoch is that undoubtedly he was a man who had been instructed in the things of God. I believe that his father Jared, from a very young age, had been teaching Enoch about who God is, what God stands for, what God expects of us. And it appears to me that Enoch accepted this young and early instruction with open arms. I think there's a lesson there to be taught to us. When we are in proximity of our children and our grandchildren, let us never lose out on moments of teaching. There's always opportunities. There are opportunities in every get-together for us as men, as spiritual leaders of our families, to instruct our young about the things that are most important. Just this last week, just either yesterday or Friday, I don't remember what day it was, our youngest granddaughter, Liza Kate, she's 8 years old. And she is the perennial worrywart. She worries about everything. And our daughter was the same way. So she comes by that. But while our daughter's her aunt, by the way, but Liza comes by this naturally. Erin was the same way. And she would imagine things that possibly could go wrong and then worry about it. When our daughter was a little girl, we left her with my mother and went to Quincy, which was 20 miles away. And Erin worried herself sick. Well, what if they have a wreck? What if they have a flat tire? What if the bridge falls down? And we still laugh about that today. And I mentioned that to my kids when Liza was showing all these signs of worrying. I said, Erin, you used to be the same way. And she said, you know what, Dad? She said, I can still be that way. And she's closing on 50 years of age. She said, I can still be that way. And I said, well, I have to admit, I can be that way if I let myself. And I said, there have been many times when I have awakened in the middle of the night from a deep sleep, and for some unknown reason, I'll find things to worry about. And I think, for Pete's sake, you're sound asleep and you wake up finding things to worry about. And I have gotten myself so stirred up before that my heart would race. And then, your mind just goes berserk. And so I learned a good number of years ago that was a good time to go right back to my roots. That was a good time to go back, and I told Aaron, even to this day, if I have one of those little worrying fits in the middle of the night, I'll repeat the Lord's Prayer. I'll make myself breathe deeply and pray the Lord's Prayer. And then I'll talk to the Lord about maybe the things that are worrying me. And it isn't long until I've settled down and fallen back asleep. And I shared that. I shared that with my daughter and those that were around that table just the other day. Now, that was not an official, let's take our Bibles and open to book and chapter and verse, but it was a moment of teaching. You can have those moments in your life as well. They are intentional. They are intentional. And it does several things. It says, it says to them, the old man's human like the rest of us. He has things that worry him just like everyone else. And he's figured out a way to help himself. Maybe it'll help me. Enoch was a young man that heard early the instructions from those who came before him. And I believe that he accepted it with open arms. I only hope and pray that our granddaughter Eliza learns to cope with things that worry her, because it doesn't get any better, does it? I thought when I was a young man, I thought, boy, when I get my children raised, I won't have so many things to worry about. Wrong. Life keeps throwing things at you. And then you end up with 1 or 2 or 5 or a dozen grandchildren, and instead of having 2 or 3 children to worry about, you've got 15 to worry about. Let's learn in an intentional way to have faith in God. I'm so thankful for Enoch's faith. Not only was he faithful to God, but the writer of Hebrews says that he pleased God. His faith caused him to be pleasing to God. Let's be pleasing to God. The next thing that I think that Enoch did was that he was initiated into the worship of his Maker. He was initiated into the worship of God. One of the greatest things that you and I can do is to learn to hold God in the place where he deserves. He is God. He is the creator. We are the creation. And you and I need to learn to humble ourselves before him and to seek his will, his purpose, and his pleasure for our lives. Enoch learned at an early age the importance of giving to God the gift of his worship. And the results of that gift are evident in his life. For his whole life, the Bible tells us for the 300 years following the birth of his son Methuselah, he had other sons and daughters, and he walked with God. He walked with God. Let me submit to you this morning that without worship, you cannot walk with God. It's not possible. It's not possible. I hear people say, well, I can worship God without the church. You've heard that. I don't need the church. Is really not all that important to me. I believe in God, but I can worship God without the church. Well, let me fire one back at you. No, you can't. You can't. Is the church perfect? Well, the church as God will, as the church that God will end up with is perfect. But it's not perfect right now. And the reason that it's not perfect right now is because it's made up of men and women like me who have plenty of flaws. And if you dig and pick close enough and long enough, you're going to find those flaws. In fact, it won't take you very long to find my flaws. They're there. But I am a part of the church. The church is important to me. I hope it's important to you as well. But I have come to the realization that while the church in this world is not perfect, that one day it will be. I have to ask myself the question, was worship perfect in the days of Enoch? No, it wasn't. Because they were flawed individuals just like you and me. I know if you believe the Bible, you have to believe that even Enoch himself was not a perfect man. There was only one who has ever lived that is perfect. Enoch himself was not a perfect man, but yet he was initiated into the worship of a perfect maker. We need to understand the importance of that. And then finally, Enoch was a man who was dedicated. He was dedicated to God's service. I look at his life, and I look at the longevity of their life in those days. The 5th chapter of Genesis is amazing when you think about how long people lived in those first generations. Jared, Enoch's father, lived 962 years. And then Enoch lived 365 years. He was just a young man when God said, okay, Enoch, you don't have to die. You come and go with me. He took him home. And here's what's amazing. Then Methuselah, who was Enoch's son, he lived and had sons and daughters. And when he died, he was 969 years old. That's the oldest living man recorded in the Bible. 969 years. And what's amazing is that there's a good chance. In fact, if you do the numbers, there was enough time that it had passed in his life that Methuselah, now wrap your mind around this. Methuselah could have known Noah and Adam. That's quite a thought. These entire first generations, he could have known his great whatever it was grandfather Adam, and he could have known his extended grandson Noah. That's a long life. That's a long life. We're not talking about Methuselah this morning, however. We're talking about Enoch. Enoch's life was a life of focus. He walked with God. And if there's anything that I want to learn this morning as a father and a grandfather, is that I need to be a person who is determined to live for God and to walk with God, to be focused in my purpose of Him. And by walking with God, I will be known as one of the faithful. Well, it all boils down to faith, doesn't it? It all boils down to faith. And I am happy to be able to read that story in the book of Genesis, which that's really all we know about Enoch. The Bible says that he lived all these years. He walked with God, and then the Bible in very subtle words says, and then he was not, for God took him. He did not have to die. And then if you go over to the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, and there in the 11th chapter, which is the chapter of faith, you read that by faith, verse 5 says that Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. Well, I've tried to please people in this life, and you have too. Sometimes it's not an easy task to fulfill, is it? What do you think about pleasing God? Is it a task? Yes. Is it a challenge? Absolutely. But it can be done. The Bible says that Enoch was one among many people who by his faith found a pleasing presence in God's sight. We're going to be standing and singing our closing hymn, Just As I Am. We're going to sing the first and the last verses. And as we sing these verses, let's decide in our life to be men and women who will seek a life to please God. Let's stand, please. Stand together, please.